Let's go Detroit Lions. Welcome, Lions fans.
Here to pay the bills again.
How do you feel about the new studio?
New
Lions
bills.
fans, let us know. 15-2 last year, dealt with a plethora of injuries, and it didn't matter. I think the Lions have been, for me, the model of team building excellence over these last few years. I think they're the team, nothing against Jared Goff, they're the best team over the last few years that has built the thing brick by brick, much like you built this studio brick by brick. So you put each of these bricks in by hand, just like Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell. Brick by brick, built a juggernaut where they became an elite team, not because of the quarterback. And again, this isn't anything against Jared Goff. He's a very good quarterback. But a lot of the turnarounds are like, oh, you just drafted Mahomes. You just drafted Josh Allen. You just drafted Lamar Jackson. The Lions have built a juggernaut brick by brick with Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell. But losing the division round, disappointing home loss in the playoffs last year, disappointing 3-touchdown lead that they lose in the NFC Championship in 2023. Can the Lions get over the hump in the playoffs this year?
Yeah, they were great again last season, even with injuries. I just hope for them that last season wasn't like a blown opportunity, right? Wasn't their opportunity that they missed, because they should have been, I think, in the NFC Championship game, and then we would have seen, could they give Philadelphia, the game that other people couldn't. It took a ton of turnovers for them to lose that Washington game. And look, Washington won the game, give them credit, but I think most people thought that Detroit was a better team than Washington last year. And because of the way the NFC Championship game went, you would be like, well, it feels like Detroit would have given them a better game than that. So now you have the concern that, okay, the roster is still in really good shape, but you lost both coordinators in one season. And we saw what happened to Philadelphia when that happened. Maybe that doesn't happen for the Lions, but that, I think, is the big fear. Look, the roster is still in great shape. Again, they've done a really good job in the offseason. They've insulated themselves from potential concerns and weaknesses. The signing of DJ Reed at corner is a really smart, astute, and important signing for them. Same problem for some reason. We still have questions about who, other than Aidan Hutchinson, is going to rush the passer on the outside, but they seem comfortable enough with that as a dynamic. The offense should be great. The defense has got enough to be dynamic and good. The question is, what impact will the coordinator loss have?
Every team has question marks. The best teams have fewer questions, right? That's not a crazy statement from me. But the Lions, we've said all offseason, okay, it's losing Ben Johnson. It's losing Aaron Glenn. So you lose your offensive and defensive coordinator to head coaching jobs. I think Dan Campbell's absolutely the glue, but there's a reason why both coordinators were coveted, especially Ben Johnson, because the offensive guy, because they've had a better offense than defense the last few years, and he's done it. I think Ben Johnson's done it in a unique way, right? Trick plays and guys wide open and aggressiveness. Can they continue offensively? Because look, as unhealthy as they were defensively, as far as injuries go, they were really healthy offensively, and they kept their guys for the most part. So they have those two questions as far as coordinators, and then Frank Ragnow retiring. And, when we break down offensive lines, another question mark thing. Do you have 4 out of 5 spots solidified? You're going to be one of the best offensive lines. That's what the Lions had on paper until Frank Ragnow retired. And now it's like only 3 out of 5 you feel good about. Still like their offensive line, but a few more questions on the Lions, particularly on this offense heading into this year.
Yeah, and look, you can argue they've promoted from within. There should be continuity there in both spots, the coaching replacements, et cetera. That's fine. There's logic to that, and that makes a lot of sense. It doesn't always work that way, though, where the hiring from within, the continuity hire. I mean, they're below the other guy in the pecking order. Sometimes that's for a reason, and they're not capable of stepping in and doing everything that the other guy did. So I'm less concerned about the loss of Aaron Glenn and more concerned about the loss of Ben Johnson, because even if Ben Johnson could be a terrible head coach, but still, he was the schematic mind behind that offense. So, those two things could exist at the same time. Even if he flames out in Chicago, losing him, and even if Dan Campbell is the glue and the sort of the guy that's keeping everyone together morale-wise and leadership-wise, he's not the X's and O's mind in that room. So somebody needs to bring that to the table and do it at the same level that Ben Johnson was doing it at. Otherwise, you would expect that offense to take a step backwards. So I think that is a concern for them. Again, the same way it was for Philadelphia a couple of years ago. Talent-wise, I think they have more than enough to be one of the best teams in the NFL again. The offensive line could be a question, but it could also be still one of the better units in the league. The skill position players collectively, wide receiver, tight end, running back, should still be fantastic. Jared Goff has shown he can play at an extremely high level, albeit with some random, inconsistent, bad months in there that seem to just pop up every now and again. But it should be a very good offense. Defense has, I think, a few more question marks, but still could be high level.
They still have a ton of good pieces to stress the defense, right? With Jameson Williams and his speed, Amon-Ra St. Brown, his ability to just get open everywhere, Khalif Raymond, his speed, Sam Laporta at tight end as a mismatch guy, and, of course, David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs at running back. They can stress the defense. And, of course, the playmaker that is Penei Sewell. Anytime you can get the ball in Penei Sewell's hands, you know it's going to be good. So I don't think I'm terribly worried about the offense. But we're talking about, high level, I'm not worried about the offense.
Yeah.
But we're talking about the fine line, tight margin for error. Do they lose any of their identity? How many times, the disrespectful runs that the Lions had? 3rd and 6, we're just going to run inside zone to Jahmyr Gibbs. Are there any things that Ben Johnson brings out the door that won't be there anymore that have kind of typified this Lions offense in the last couple of years? I'll be keeping an eye
on the
on
sheer
that.
volume of trick plays. I mean, it was a sort of joke that, there's an endless number of these, and there's, they have so many, the Rolodex of trick plays they have is so deep. That's probably a real thing in terms of, think how much time you need to spend as an opposing team just researching all the crap that Ben Johnson might throw at you randomly in a game in week 11, right? If the new offense does not have the same depth of tricks up its sleeve, it probably is easier for, defense to manage, because you don't need to spend days, researching and defending and staying disciplined with these random, trick plays, the stumble bomb and everything else they've got, the Penei Sewell plays. You can just focus on the offense.
So offensively, what do you think? Do you think they end up in a similar spot?
I think the offense is still fine. I have a little bit more concern about the defense, but I think it should still be okay. To me, Detroit, it's one of these interesting conversations where, you're grading them on the curve, right? They'll be good. The question is, are they still capable of being in the championship game in a Super Bowl? And that, I think, is where the loss of the coordinators might be a problem.
Hey, guys, just taking a quick break to tell you, hey, just over 50% of you are still unsubscribed to Check the Mic. It helps the channel. It helps to make sure that you don't miss any of our shows. So if you have a chance, hit the subscribe button right now. Defensively, Aidan Hutchinson was on a defensive player of the year type of run, gets injured. They then trade for Zadarius Smith, which, whether Aidan Hutchinson was there or not, I think there was multiple years of us saying there's a lot of plays where he's the only one getting pressure. And if he just had any kind of help or a little bit of push from the interior. And last year they got more of that. Alim McNeil played well. They brought in DJ Reader when he was healthy. Those guys are back. And then they bring in Tyreek Williams as a first-round defensive tackle. So they look good at defensive tackle, even with Levi Onwuzurike injured for the season. They brought him back on a one-year free agent deal. They go from having maybe the deepest defensive line group to, still one of the deeper defensive tackle groups, I should say. But yeah, Aidan Hutchinson's running mate is a big question. They bring back Marcus Davenport, who is not. Even when the Vikings signed him a couple years ago, it was like he's never played more than 500 snaps. This is risky. Then he plays a little over 200 snaps over the last 2 years. Good with the buy low for $2.5 million for Marcus Davenport, but there's not a whole lot of dependable options opposite Aidan Hutchinson right now.
No, I mean Marcus Davenport is like a throwaway pick at this point. If it works out, great, but you're not expecting anything from him anymore. They're so dependent on Aidan Hutchinson now for pass rush, and to be fair, they lost him last year. It didn't cost them, it didn't slow them down necessarily. But again, with the change in coordinator, you wonder if that's more of an issue this year if he doesn't play the same way he was playing. Tom Pelissero was at Lions camp, and he's like, you wouldn't know, other than the sleeve on his knee, you wouldn't know that this guy suffered a devastating leg injury last season. He looks like he looked last year, like he looks 100%. So that will be interesting to monitor, right? Are you getting Aidan Hutchinson the way he was last season, or are you getting a player that has been slowed down and is going to take some time to get back to his best?
And I think they're deep everywhere. Remember their rebuild. We talked about the Bears. They're rebuilding this roster, and they just didn't get to the D-line yet. The Lions was the other way. They hadn't gotten to the secondary yet, and then last year they did. I thought they made a very shrewd move bringing in Carlton Davis for a third-round pick. He's out now, but you mentioned DJ Reed coming in. Terrion Arnold, last year's first-rounder, had his struggles early throughout the season, penalties early on, and just general getting beaten in man coverage at times. But I think he still has a ton of potential in year two to turn things around. So the 1-2 punch of Terrion Arnold, DJ Reed, the best safety duo in the NFL with Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch back there. So Jack Campbell last year in year two. I remember he struggled a little bit his first year as a first-rounder. He looked much better last season. Alex Anzalone still there with his veteran presence. So they have talent at every level, and this is all the job that Brad Holmes has done these last couple of years, making sure that they not only have a good group of starters, but as we noticed in camp a couple of years ago, their backups are potential starters as well. And I think that's why they handled so many of the injuries last year, is the depth that they've built on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, there's a lot of talent there. It's a big year, I think, for Terrion Arnold. I agree. I think he still has potential, but if he doesn't take that step, they've got some issues anyway. Obviously, they've got contingency there with Ennis Rakestraw, they drafted in the same draft, lower down. But Arnold in particular, I think they will be expecting to take a step forward, and the need is for one of those guys to raise their level.
So we're talking a lot about, again, personnel, some of the changes, new defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator, the mental aspect of it and the coaching aspect of it. Dan Campbell has been unreal since turning around the culture, turning everything around. You add in his crazy fourth down aggressive fourth down decision making. And I know
crazy. You
get those behind the scenes quotes where Dan Campbell's like, we're going for every fourth down no matter what.
Yeah.
And you and I will show up on a Monday and we're like, oh, Dan's just, playing the numbers. And then maybe he gets a little hunch here and there and he goes, but it's really, sometimes he's just like, I'm just doing it. I'm just going. This is an
important thing. Like, Dan Campbell is not, like, every time the broadcast puts up the analytics and, some grizzled dinosaur of a former player is in the booth being like, the analytics say always go for it. Or grizzled dinosaur of a former player, or Joe Buck, who just takes it as a life mission to ignore any and all interesting data that's happened since the advent of 1994. But those guys will be like, analytics tells you to go for everything. It's a joke. It's always go for it. It isn't, right? It often is go for it, and it's certainly more go for it than conventional wisdom was. But Dan Campbell is more aggressive than the analytics models, right? This is the interesting thing about his fourth down aggressiveness, is he isn't just taking the numbers and saying, we go for it anytime my data says yes, right? He's not just taking the green light the analytics gives him. He is more aggressive than the data says to be. And that's what I think is fascinating, because it means it massively increases the variance within games. If they break his way, the Lions win these games, Dan Campbell, massive swings in momentum that go Detroit's way. But it means in every single game, he's handing the opponent the opportunity to get the whole game back in a play, right? We are 2 scores up, but I'm going to go for it in 4th and 3 from my own 8-yard line, and suddenly the opposition stops you, punches it in the next play, and now you're only up a score.
And I'm not saying this is why the Commanders beat them, because there was a lot of things that happened in that game. But you ran into the other Dan, Quinn, who was as aggressive, if not more, but with an underdog. And so I'm going to keep an eye on this with Dan Campbell. As you become the favorite, as you become the best team, theoretically, there's 2 ways of looking at it. You could stay just as aggressive because you're better and it'll work more often. But as you're saying, if you fail, you're giving the lesser team an opportunity to come back. So every year now, it feels like the Lions season is going to come down to, how do some of these aggressive decisions go?
Yeah.
And one of the years, if they run into the right decision in the NFC Championship or in the Super Bowl, we're like, Dan Campbell, you legend. Or like in 2023 where people said, oh, you should have kicked the field goal against the 49ers. You're like, oh, man, you idiot. You should have done the opposite. So much of the Lions seasons, I think, is going to come down to how the variance happens on those fourth downs.
Yeah, I forget who made this point, but everyone focuses on turnovers and the sort of the power that they have relative to winning games. Now with the increase in fourth down aggressiveness throughout the league, we need to be focusing on turnovers and turnovers on downs, right? With teams that go for it a lot on fourth down, you need to focus on those turnovers on downs as well, because they're basically the same play as turnovers, but they have a different, there's a payoff as well. It's not quite the same in totality, but the outcome is the same. So if you have a team, you might have a team that doesn't turn the ball over at all, no fumbles, 0 interceptions, but if they go for it on a bunch of fourth downs and they're like 0-4 on those situations, you effectively turn the ball over 4 times. You might be -2 in the turnover differential, and that's an awful big hole to crawl out of. Or they could all break your way, and you're laughing.
All right, man, let's make a pick. Over under 10.5 from our friends over at FanDuel. Where are you going with the Lions for the season?
Over. I think if and when they run into problems this season, it will be a postseason problem, not a regular season one.
And I know our audience. I'm a big fan of what they've done in Detroit. I'm going over as well. Over the 10.5 for Detroit. This is their year. This is your year. Lions fans, appreciate you guys.
Thanks for watching all the way to the end of our video.
For more great content, click here to subscribe and here to watch another video. We'll see you again soon.